but he ended up marrying his daughter. So there was all kinds of historical stories and tales that used to go around.
Right. So you wouldn't have had so much the ghost stories. Those would have been things that you kids would have been talking about.
Yeah, they would have been
making
yeah,
things up about
yeah,
them. Like this poor old lady down there all
yeah,
by herself
yeah.
in the home. Was she ever married? Never had a
Nelda
family?
Van.
Yeah,
Oh
another.
no, oh God, no.
Oh, so she,
Oh no,
yeah, she was just
no.
somebody that was mysterious.
Can I blow my nose?
Yes, you.
Can I blow?
Wait, let me stand by here.
Put my tissue away.
Okay, we're rolling.
Okay. Tell me about give me a Christmas memory. What would a Christmas have been like for you? Pick any age you want.
We used to always go to midnight mass the night before, and I suppose the strongest memory of Christmas wouldn't even be Christmas Day in terms of presents or something, but Christmas Eve and the excitement and the anticipation and listening to the radio and listening to the broadcasts of Santa Claus, because we used to send letters to Santa Claus. And he'd come on the radio the night before and saying, I hope you're all in bed and you're all asleep and that you've been good children, this, that and the other. And just the sheer excitement of it, that was one thing. And another thing, my mother used to go on a manic cleaning frenzy. And we had linoleum on the kitchen floor, and the floors had to be waxed. And what we had to do was tie rags around our feet and, skate up and down the kitchen floor to make them shiny. The silver would be polished, which we hated doing, because it was only taken out once a year. That's all part of it. She'd always stuff the turkey, and I just again have pictures of breadcrumbs everywhere. She fighting with the turkey out in the kitchen, and just stuff everywhere, and the cleaning and the excitement. And then going to midnight mass was absolutely always gorgeous because nobody in our neighbourhood drove. Everybody walked down to church. And just to see everybody, all the parents and all their kids, and all the kids so excited, leaving their houses at night time and walking down to midnight mass. Very religious, obviously, more religious than commercial.
Yes.
That was lovely. And then you'd come home, and my friends across the road were always allowed to open their presents on that night. We were never allowed. We had to wait till the next morning. And my mother had a thing, I don't know where it came from, fries. Must have been a commercial on radio or television or something, although we never had a television. Fries, chocolate cream, and you had to stand in order of your height, So it would be my sister and then my brother directly underneath, and his arm out and me directly underneath that. And Santa would always write a little letter to us. My mother knew how to get us to, because for a whole month before Christmas she had this system, like her own little behaviour mod system. And she had a chart up in the kitchen, and she had these things called guggies, which are eggs. It's kind of a colloquial word for the word egg. She called it guggy, and you had to try and earn your guggies.
Okay.
So that Santa Claus would come, and earning them was a bit of a struggle for me. So depending on the number of guggies you had, like Santa wrote you a letter according to how you had behaved. And then just the excitement of opening the presents. We never got a whole lot, but it's the sense of the excitement,
Sure.
And the other traditions that went around it, and obviously, we used to get the turkey from Kerry. And when I think about it now, it fascinates me. My grandmother always raised turkeys. My father has memories they sent turkeys to London for sale for Christmas, but my grandmother used to actually send us a turkey, and the poor old beast would come in a box, and he'd be hanging in our garage for days, hanging by his skinny little neck. And I can see him, the little red, whatever you call it, on top of his head and everything, and he was hanging there, and my mother had to pluck him. So don't ask me how long he was there. I mean, everything goes into a fridge here, and the idea of a turkey hanging in your garage for how long?
Yeah. And how would it have gotten from Kerry to Dublin?
In a box tied up with string.
And
on the train, yeah.
On the train, mailed out too.
Mm-hmm. Nobody got sick.
No.
No, we had no central heating in the house. Our garage was kind of like having an outhouse. So, when I think of it now, I'm like, good Lord, and we ate those turkeys, and
I never thought a thing of it. Did you have a Christmas tree?
We did. We used to have a real little Christmas tree. Very simple, very simple little ornaments on it. And not so much decorations. We used to hang all the Christmas cards. My mother used to tie string from one side of the room to the other, and we hung all the cards on them.
Yes. Yeah. Holly was holly.
Holly, we used to bring some holly in. We had a nice bush growing in the back garden. It wasn't holly, but it had lovely green leaf with lovely little red berries.
Yes.
Can't remember the name of it,
Yeah.
but we had that around the house.
Did you ever celebrate Christmas in Kerry?
1 year.
Uh-huh.
1 year, and it was quite different. It was a year my grandfather died, and it was different, because we weren't at home, we were in somebody else's house, now in terms of going to mass and that. But the best part about it was the day after Christmas, Londrolene, Wren's Day, the day of the wren.
Yes.
That was so much fun, because you would dress up, and my cousins played instruments. My two little cousins played accordions. And you would go around from house to house, dressed up in whatever bit of an old rag you could get your hand on, play a few tunes, and I was collecting the money. They gave us money, or they gave you something to eat. My memories of them is getting money from them.
And then you have a party or something?
Yeah. Well, we were just little kids that year I was there. I mean, the Wren is now a huge thing in Dingle. The Wren Boys Parade, where they have the dance and they have, different streets having their own Wren. With us, it was just little gangs of kids. But you'd see other gangs of kids and other neighbours out as well, and doing a little party piece or some kind of a recitation.
Yeah. Did you have that in Dublin? There were
No.
No Wren Boys?
No.
Is it St. Patrick's Day in Dingle is where they have the parade at midnight?
I'm not familiar with that. Doesn't ring a bell.
Right. But I'm usually there around
Yeah.
St. Patrick's Day. And
Yeah, I don't think
they
St.
were now-
Patrick's Day is huge there, actually. It's big. 26th of December is big, but not really St. Patrick's Day.
It seems to me, I remember that because they weren't allowed to march, they marched at midnight so that they weren't observed. And there's still some kind of a festival
Yeah.
now in Dingle Town. I have a cousin.
Gosh,
who
Peggy,
lives
that that could well be.
Yeah,
I haven't been there on
haven't
St.
heard that.
Patrick's
Yeah,
Day in
yeah,
in years and
Yeah.
years.
Yeah. I always think of you as a person involved with the arts, and now I can understand why you really are involved with the arts. Your dad was a poet, published poet?
His poetry wasn't published, but he's had 3 novels published.
He was a writer.
Yeah, yeah. And in
Do we
his
have his novels in this club?
no, they're in the Irish language.
I see.
He at one point, I mean, he always liked to write. When he was younger, he had written a play that was produced in the Taibhhearc in Galway. My father was very close to his mother, and although she was a farmer's wife, she was a very intelligent. I don't mean to denigrate anybody, but she was a very intelligent, intellectual, scholarly kind of a woman who promoted her children in whatever way she could to be the best they could be. They were all musicians. They all went to college, which was unusual enough down there. For a farmer, she wanted the best for them all. And Daddy wrote, he had those 3 novels, and he did.
Them?
Yeah, the first one, they're all in Irish. The first one was called An Feile Duig, and he wrote it at one point when he had a slip disc and he was laid flat on his back for a couple of months, and he was in bed, and something that had been in his head for a long time came. He won a prize, one of the Oireachtas prizes of Book of the Year for it. It's called An Feile Duig, which means the man from the north. And it tells a story about a young man from Northern Ireland who is raised in Belfast only with a mother. And he's always wanted to know who his father was, and he knows he has something to do with West Kerry. And so he gets a job in West Kerry as a creamery manager. And bit by bit, over 3 books, the plot of who his father is unravels. And the first book is a wonderful book. They're all wonderful, but again in historical context, because the first part of the story starts out at a market in Tralee. And Daddy then takes a big chunk of the book and he describes the journey by train from Tralee out to Dingle. And the masses of people who'd been on the market, and chickens and geese and turkeys on the train, and then having to get out of the train and walk at a certain point, when they're chugging up a hill, and another point where they had to wait 6 hours for the tide to turn in Blennerville so that the train could actually cross over. Yeah. So that one's called An Feile Duig. The second one is called Creamery, and the third one is called Pacina Nahrucha, The Sins of the Fathers. And the first one I remember being fascinated by it because I typed it for him. He wrote and I typed. It was a lot of typing.
I guess so.
But I got this insight into a person who wasn't my father. And it was very interesting.
How old were you when that?
I was a teenager. I was in high school at the time, 16, 17, I suppose. But things he wrote about, I remember at one point there's the strong theme of this relationship between a man and a woman in the book. And I'm like, my father wrote that. I was almost afraid to look at him for a while after. It was like, he's actually a man.
Yeah, right.
He's not just my dad.
Yeah, right.
And so it was a little transition in a way. I mean, I liked it, and it was magnificently written, just the language. But I was so fascinated to see this other person and to get to know somebody different.
Yeah.
My father as a writer. And so he did those 3 books, and then he would always write little bits of poems. He always loved poetry. And along the way, he wrote stuff. There's notebooks at home full of his writings and sayings, and he's, me, I was umbilically attached to him.
Yes,
Yeah, he was a special man.
Yeah. And now, will those books, do you think, be translated into English at some
I
point?
don't know. I don't see that they would be. They're written for the Irish language, and
Okay.
I think they'll stay there.
Do you write? Is that one of your things? You don't. That didn't come. And he also played the violin, did you say?
Yeah, he did.
And now you're learning.
I have his fiddle. Yeah, Daddy played in a Feile band years ago.
What was the name of the band?
I have no clue. We have some lovely, wonderful old photographs from, the 1930s. He tells a lovely story, Daddy does, when he was a schools inspector there was some school down in county, in the Midlands somewhere, Longford or somewhere, who was looking for a grant from the Department of Education because they wanted to teach dancing class. And the Department of Education got a little bit dubious about this, and they said, now why would a dancing class, and they want us to fund it sort of. And they decided they would send an inspector down just to check it out and make sure that everything was legitimate above board. And they sent Daddy down. And the night Daddy arrived down was a miserable, wet, windy, it was in Cavan, a miserable, wet, rotten, windy night. And so Daddy didn't look very official. He had a very gentle, genial look about him, where schools inspectors would be very formal, and you'd see them coming. You could almost smell the inspector coming because he just had that aura about him. So Daddy arrived anyway, and he didn't have an umbrella or anything. He had an old beat up raincoat in the back of his car. He wasn't expecting the rain, so he put the beat up old raincoat on him and his head, and he went in. And when he got to the door, he shook it off, and he says, "There are Feile here tonight." And the fella says, "Oh, Jesus Christ, there is." He said, "But we're having a terrible problem." He says, "There's an inspector coming down from Dublin." He says, "And we have no fiddle player for the night." Jesus, what are we going to do? So Daddy said nothing. He says, "You need a fiddle player, do you?" He says, and he says, "I think I have one in the car." So Daddy went out anyway and got the fiddle, and he got up on the stage, and I think there might have been a drummer and somebody else, and Daddy ended up playing for the night on the stage. And at the end of the night anyway, he got down off the stage, and the fella says, "Jason, that was terrible good of you. I'm awful sorry now you didn't get to dance." He says, "But the worst part of it is that the inspector never got here, didn't get to see it." And Daddy says, "He was here." And that's the kind of thing he would have done.
Yeah.
A very gentle soul. But the fiddle was, I don't really have very strong memories of him later on, playing a whole lot. At weddings and stuff, he'd pull the fiddle out, and something he loved to do was he loved to dance and play the fiddle at the same time.
Oh my gosh.
He walked. Daddy walked and walked and walked and walked and walked and walked miles every day. He was very fit. But he loved to do the old style of Irish dancing, the footwork, not... It's like the shan nose dancing. And at a wedding, that would always be his party piece. He'd pull out the fiddle and he'd be playing away and he'd step. But that's the only time I ever really saw him playing it. So the fiddle was lying around, and as you know, in later years he got Parkinson's and he couldn't play the fiddle anymore, and it was lying around. Every so often he'd say, "Now, where's that fiddle of mine? Is it all right?" And my sister and I were dreadful. It was stuck in a case on top of a wardrobe somewhere,
Yeah.
We didn't pay too much attention to it. So about 2 years ago, I don't know what possessed me. I thought, it had been in the back of my mind for a long time because I played the bodhrán, but you can't play the bodhrán at home on your own. It's a drum. But an instrument you can. And I thought, let me start learning to play the fiddle. And I couldn't have given that man a greater gift. He had Parkinson's and he was doubled up, but he straightened up and he says, I was so disappointed. He said that fiddle was lying around. He said, and I thought no one would ever use it again, and it belonged to my Uncle Dan from Cork. And my sister said, you just wouldn't believe what it did for him. So I brought it back here to America and I got work done on it. And I think I told you this story before, but I brought it back home the summer before last to show him what I had done. And the poor little man, he tried playing and his fingers, he couldn't. It was heartbreaking to watch, you know, because of his Parkinson's disease. But he picked it up and he's examining every crack in it and he's touching it and he's turning it over and checking it out. And he looks at me and he says, I wonder if it remembers how much I used to love it.
Yeah, such a beautiful story. Yeah.
If my house went on fire, there's one thing I would take out of it. It's that fiddle.
That's it. Yeah.
You know, and he did get to hear me play it a little bit, and I was trying to play the tin whistle in the past, and he'd be telling me every squeak and note I did wrong. With that fiddle, he sat and he encouraged me and he watched, and actually, you know, he died in December, and I was dying to bring it home on Christmas because I had a few tunes and I know I had kind of stepped into a place where I wasn't quite the beginner I was a year ago, and I wanted him to hear it.
Yes.
And when he died, I was like,
Yeah. Just
but I
by
did.
days, yes.
I did. What I did was we waked him at home,
Yes.
as you know.
Yes.
We waked him at home, and it was a typical Irish wake in so many ways because it went on for 3 days.
And it was
you
in
know.
Kerry?
No, we had it in Dublin,
In
which is
Dublin.
unusual. He died in Dublin. And we had always said, we're keeping him at home. And we waked him at home. And it was lovely. He was in his own bed,
Mm-hmm.
back to being a tall man, all stretched out inside in the bed. And all the neighbours came in. It was lovely. So many of the country people coming in and they just kneeled by the bed and they said their little prayer. And there was the tea and the coffee and the sherry and the whiskey and the stories all night long. But in the morning, because we slept in the room with him that night, and in the morning, about 6 o'clock, I woke up and I went upstairs and I got the fiddle and I said, here's my chance to play for him when there was nobody around. So,
You did.
yeah. I mean, I still get mad at him, you know, because I'm up in the house here and I play something. It's like, what the hell do you have to go and die on me for? I really wanted you to hear this. It's like, couldn't you have stuck it around on this just 6 more months, you know, just because I got better.
Did he teach you to play the baron?
No, actually. I have a friend of mine here who tells me that probably he thinks I have a bit of North African blood in me. But it's not beyond the realms of possibility, I suppose, southwest of Ireland and all
You
the...
never know.
I actually went out with a fella at home for a bunch of years who played the flute, and he taught me how to play the baron. But I'd always wanted to. I've always loved percussion.
Yeah.
And that particular baron has travelled. It's been in a restaurant
Pick
in
it up.
Morocco.
Pick it up.
This is made by a fella in Belfast.
Oh my gosh, the picture
And you know, it's
falls off on
fading.
it.
I know.
Oh my God.
I'll have to get him to do a new one for me. The skin has actually gone very thin. But this baron has been in a restaurant in Morocco. It's been on the tubes in London. It's been on whatever public transport system there is in Amsterdam. It has travelled all around Corsica and Sardinia on the back of a bike. It's a well-travelled little baron.
And who made it?
A fella in Belfast by the name of Eamon Maguire from the New Lodge Road area.
And is he still making them?
Yeah.
Do you know, even just you talking, you can hear it?
You can actually when I come closer
Yeah,
to
you
it.
can.
Yeah.
Would you play it just a little bit for us?
The only thing about it is, Peggy, that it's hard.
It's dry.
It's very dry, you know, and it needs a bit of moisture. So I think if I were to, I think it would hurt you.
It would hurt me.
It would hurt you if you had to hear it. Yeah, and you know the back of it then, you can dampen it, you know.
Yes.
I mean, I'll just, you know, by moving your hand in the back of it. It changes and then you can hit on the rim, but that's a very hard, harsh sound. I mean, the baron needs to be. You know the musician Seamus Ennis who said the best way to play a baron? With a sharpened penknife. Never heard that story?
No, I never did.
Famous piper at home, he hated the baron. The problem with the baron is a lot of people think all you have to do is bait the bejesus out of it. You know, make noise with it. Well, it's not. It's a very subtle little instrument.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, he had that experience with a few people, so he was like with the sharpened penknife. yeah.
Now, you mentioned all these places that barn has been. Obviously, it's been with you.
Oh, that's a very independent bar
All
on.
right.
Likes to take off on its own.
It doesn't send back postcards.
No,
How did you get to do all that
no,
traveling?
no. If you're Irish, I think you travel.
The
You know,
little
it's
gypsy blood.
not. I think there is a little gypsy blood, and it's probably part of an island mentality where you look out all the time. You know, we have a history of emigration, and I suppose in recent years when people got, more money in that, they're travelling. But I was very lucky, see, because I taught in Dublin, and the fact that I taught meant I had my summers off. So every year I just took off. My first year, 2 years teaching, I went all around Europe on one of those Interrail tickets, and I used to go off at Christmas skiing. I had the vacation time. You know, in the summer I took off all around Europe. I spent a summer in India, spent a summer in South America, spent a summer in Israel, spent 2 different summers here in America. So, can't get any better than that. 2 months off and you're paid and
you're off.
you can travel.
And teachers get some help, kind of discount travels or no?
No.
No, okay.
No.
Yeah, that's, just go and do it. And were you living at home then still while you were
Part
teaching?
of it.
Part of the time?
Part of the time I lived at home, and then I moved out and moved into, I lived in different apartments and houses with friends and stuff for a bunch of years before I came over here.
What made you decide to come to the States?
I only came on a holiday. I'm not supposed to be here really. And I actually wasn't supposed to be here when I came either. They had at one point at home in Dublin way too many qualified teachers and not enough jobs for them. So they brought in this system called the career break system, and you could take a year, 2, 3 years, and you could come back into your job at any point during that 3 years. And the idea was, the hope was that some people would go and not come back, and it would allow those who couldn't get jobs to get jobs, and it proved to be way too successful because a ton of us took off. And the year I came, a very good friend of mine whom I'd gone to high school with and how I ended up teaching with in Dublin, she came over here to Fairfield to her brother who was with the Bank of Ireland in Manhattan. And so I thought, I'm going to go to her for a few months, and I took a year off. Part of it I spent in Ireland doing all kinds of crazy things, and then I decided I'd come and visit Ger, and my plan was to come for 4 months, and I'm still here.
You're still here. When was that? How long ago?
1988.
And was that your first time in America?
No, I had been here for two holidays before that.
Okay.
And it's funny because a ton of my dad's family ended up in New Haven, lived in New Haven, yeah. But I came here, I came to Ger, to Fairfield, yeah, and